Hey everyone, this is Gail, and we're doing a Facebook Live today, so welcome. I would be happy to have you ask any questions here, or just let me know something that you'd like to see. We'll be editing with the new Clean Edit Portrait workflow that's just been released today. So let me know where you're coming from, where you're joining us from, just for a few minutes while we give everyone a second to come. It always seems like it takes a few minutes for people to pop on, and then we'll get going from there. I have a couple of images that we're going to edit with today, and I'm just going to walk through how to use this collection, how I use this collection, maybe some tips for customizing the presets to your images. And then we'll see how it goes. So welcome Amber. Amber from North Carolina, woohoo, in California. All of you which are probably experiencing a little bit of spring. We don't have that quite here yet. It's a rainy, cloudy day where I'm at. Awesome. Well, as we get started today, there was a question that popped up on the thread where I invited everybody to this Facebook Live, and I thought I would start with that. So I'm going to open up. Her question was, where do you install all these presets? So once you unzip them, where do they go? And if you've used presets before, you probably kind of know the gist of installation. But here is my download. I've unzipped it. The Pretty Clean Edit brushes is the first folder here. My second folder is the Clean Edit Portrait Workflow. These are the main presets. And then we have the Pretty Clean Edit Portrait Toolkit. And these are also presets. These two folders are going to get installed in the same location. And then the brushes are going to get installed in a different location. The Clean Edit Portrait Workflow and the Clean Edit Portrait Toolkit, they're going to go in the Develop Presets folder, and the Clean Edit brushes are going to go in the Local Adjustments folder. So I'm going to come up here. Let me click on Lightroom so we can see it. On my Mac, it's here under the Lightroom menu, but on a PC, it's going to be under your File menu. You're going to find your Preferences folder. And then you're going to go to this Show Lightroom Presets folder. I'm going to click on that. This is going to open up select my Lightroom folder. I'm going to double click here. And then you'll see I've got a bunch of different presets folders. The Develop Presets folder, this is where I'm going to copy and paste those two preset folders. Let's come back here and I'll show you. The Clean Edit Portrait Workflow, you're going to copy and paste this into the Develop Presets folder. This Clean Edit Portrait Toolkit, you're going to copy and paste that folder into this Develop Presets folder. I'm not going to do it because I've already got them installed. The Local Adjustments Presets folder, this is where your brushes are going to go, and you're going to double click on this folder and open it up, and you're going to just do Command or Control A to select all of these, and then Command or Control C to copy them, and you're going to paste them into the Local Adjustment Presets folder. You don't want to paste the whole folder in when you're installing brushes, just the actual .lr template files when you're installing brushes. So hopefully that's some good information as far as installing. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them, and I'll try to get those answered. Installing can be tricky sometimes, so sometimes you have to walk through and troubleshoot a little bit. Once you've done it a couple of times, you won't find it too tricky, I don't think, anymore. So let's dive into this collection. These are the Clean Edit Portrait Workflow, and this is kind of where you're going to start. These are the main presets, I would say. And then here's the toolkit, it's right above. And these are all the little tweak presets that we're going to play with today. So you'll want to have them both installed and opened. One thing I really like about this collection is that if you notice here at the top, we have this step 1, step 2, step 3. And this really walks you through exactly how you should edit and the steps you should go through to edit with this collection. And really clicking on the presets isn't necessarily going to do anything, but just seeing this, step one, set your white balance. So we're going to start with that here with this image. We're going to go set our white balance. And feel free, you can come over here to your basic panel, you can click on your dropper and set your white balance. You can just tweak the sliders and set your white balance. But what's really awesome is this toolkit. If I just scroll up, this will help me set my white balance. Just by a few clicks. I usually start with auto. If as shot isn't exactly, that's probably what I'm seeing right here, is as shot. If it doesn't look like what I think it should look like, then I start with white balance auto. I'm going to click on that. That does a nice warm up of this image, but I'm always going to scroll through some of these other ones. And I actually think that this white balance daylight neutral might be the best one. I'm going to click on it. It's slightly less warm and just looks like it may have looked when it was shot. You can always just slide over all of these. And I'm just looking up here in my little preview navigator to see what it's going to look like. And some of them I can tell that's not how it should look. And some of them I think, oh, this white balance sunny, I could maybe go with that. White balance sunrise, sunset. Ultimately, I'm probably going to pick one of these as a starting place. I want to pick the best starting place I can. So sometimes it's auto. In this case, I'm going to leave it as white balance, the daylight neutral. So the second step here says to set your exposure. Now, this image I think is really nicely exposed. I'm not going to play with my exposure. I think my exposure is right. But if I had an image that looked like this, then this is underexposed, and I'm going to need to set the exposure correctly. Okay, and that's where I would do it. I would set it right here. The second step is where I would set my exposure. And then the third step says to begin your clean edit workflow. So these presets are set up in little sections here. So we have a bunch of base presets right here. Then we have another section of presets, the curve presets. Then we have another section of split tone presets and the tint overlay presets. And these last ones are just really mixers. They're basically all-in-one presets. They might have chosen from different categories up here and work together. So you can always try these too if you're not getting what you want up here. So if I choose base 1 clean color, I'm just going to click on that. And I really like what that does actually. But these presets in the bases are going to override each other. So I'm only going to choose one of these. I can't choose clean color and then choose velvet color because basically they're overriding. So whichever one you choose from this section is going to be the one you choose from this section. You can't choose 4 from this section. So I actually really like that clean color, so I'm going to stick with that. Now I'm going to pop down here to the curve and see if there's anything that I want to do down here. And, you know, this is really your vision. So if there's something you want to click on down here, feel free to choose. This is the S-curve pop. I like what that does. It just adds a little bit more contrast, brightens the highlights, darkens the shadows, pops the color just a little bit. It's a really nice pop. Soft matte I think is really pretty too. That's another one that I just kind of default to that fits my style a lot. So let's come down here to split tones and let's talk about the split tones a little bit. If I feel like my image is getting a little bit warm, and sometimes it will do that with the S-curve. It will bring in a little bit more warmth. So if I feel like it's getting a little bit more warm, or a little bit too warm, I'll click on this all cool. And you can see that that just cools things down. These split tones are going to be, basically how they work is they're going to use the split tone panel. So if I click on split tone all cool, you'll see that there were some adjustments over here made to the split tone panel, and that is cooling my image a bit. So as I click over here, another one that I tend to kind of like is this silver lilac. It's maybe a little bit warm for this image, but you can see that these sliders were tweaked when I clicked on that. If you're not familiar with the split tone panel, Basically, you're setting a color to add to your highlights, and you're setting a color to add to your shadows. And this balance slider is going to determine the balance between those two. Are we a little bit heavier on color in the highlights? Are we a little bit heavier on color in the shadows? And then saturation is going to determine how much of that color is in the highlights and shadows. And I can tweak these, play with these. And it's not going to affect this preset over here unless I save it that way, but this is just going to affect how it looks on my image. If you played with these too much and you're a little bit confused at what you've done, then you can always hit this reset, split tone reset, and that will kind of reset the split tones, and you can start looking at them again and decide if you need to add one or not. Let's add the silver lilac split tone. I kind of think that's a pretty addition. I do think it's maybe a little warm. We might adjust that going forward. So the tint overlays, I just want to explain what these are a little bit. So these are generally probably going to be graduated filters that add just a little bit of color. So I'm going to show you the before and after here, and I'm going to click on one of these. Let's try maybe rose. Let's click on rose. Now if I highlight over here, just you can see these pins. I have some pins here. This bottom one that's actually off the bottom of the image is the one that's going to be adding the color for this tint overlay. And you can see if I click on it here, now look at the color here, and it's kind of this rosy color, okay? If you need to adjust this, if you apply it and it's a little bit too much and you want to adjust, then you come over here and you click on that color box right there in the graduated filter panel, and you can add more or less, okay? So you can adjust that if it's too much or too little on your image. So just a quick tip to know where the color is coming from and how it's being adjusted. So the tint overlays are all going to kind of work that way, and remember it's probably going to be the little button that shows up here down on the bottom. And then these pretty mixers are really just combinations of the presets above, and sometimes there will be a perfect one for your image and sometimes maybe not. So I'm just going to click on this Fave 5. I think that's actually really pretty. You might scroll over and be like, ooh, that's perfect. Don't do anything else. So anyway, just a little tip. You can reset. I'm just going to go back in my history and just start all over again because I've made a lot of tweaks there. So probably how I would do this, edit this image. Let's walk through. Let's do we chose the daylight neutral as the white balance. I would choose probably clean color. I would choose maybe this S-curve pop. I like what that did. And then I really think I would probably stop there. I might choose this silver lilac too. I really like this split tone. I think it's really pretty. One thing I could try is coming up to the Pretty Toolkit and making some adjustments up here. And these are actually really nice presets for making adjustments. They make the adjustments one click. So if you want to add contrast, you can click on one of these to add maybe a little bit more contrast. Let's do that. One of my favorite presets up here is the soft center light ones. These are really pretty additions to your image. I'm going to choose a soft center light cool, and I think in general that maybe opens up a little bit too much coolness, but I'm going to click on my radial filter because the soft center light presets use the radial filter, and I do this all the time with these presets. I just come in here and make it a little bit smaller, make it fit just over my subject a little bit so it's not brightening the whole image, especially if my subject is in a small portion of the image. I'll do this. If the subjects are filling the image, then maybe I wouldn't do this as much. And then you can adjust how much brightness is being added to your image with that one. So really nice. These tone highlights and shadows, soft and hard, are really fun to play with too. They can add a little bit more contrast. They can add just a little bit more oomph maybe to your image. So you can play around with these and see which ones you like. So they're always some fun presets. I just clicked on some of those random. I think they're pretty. And you can see that just a couple of clicks, your image is going to be ready to go. The nice thing about these is they've taken things that you would normally adjust to your photo. So if I'm editing without presets, these are things I'm going to do to my photo to get the image the way I like. And the thing I really love about this kit is that it takes those adjustments and puts them into one-click presets, which is super easy. So one question I can see was about the overlays. How do you erase an overlay from your image, and how do you adjust it? So I'm just going to go back. Let's play with an overlay, and I'll show you how to adjust it or even erase it. So if I click on this, I can't remember if I have an overlay on here already, so I'm going to click on Silver Veil. I can't remember if I had one on or not. Let's come down here. Actually, I'm going to go before and after. Hover over it will show me my pins, and I know it's going to be this pin that is down here on the bottom. So how do I delete it from part of my image? Well, because it's a graduated filter, and I'm going to turn on my overlay so I can show you this. It's going to turn my image red. I'm sorry. If I click on the brush tool and then click erase, I could erase this from off my subject if I wanted to. And you can see as I click erase and I'm brushing now that I'm erasing the effect from off of my subject. So now the effect is only happening to the background of my image. So that's one way to erase it from a part of your image. You can edit the overlays kind of just like I told you. So you can reduce the saturation here, adding more or less saturation using this color box. And you can then, like I just showed you, edit it from off part of your image using this brush. So basically how I did that again was I clicked on the radial filter, or the graduated filter, and I selected the filter that I wanted to edit. And then I clicked on the brush tool and then chose erase to remove it. So because this affects the whole image, I'm not going to need to add it to more of my image. I'm only going to need to erase. So that's how I would do it for this one. So hopefully that answers your question. Now let's talk about these little pretty mixers, and one in particular. So I'm going to need to reset here a little bit because I've done so many things now. I'm just going to go to the history and do it. Sorry, I clicked so many things, and then who knows what I've got on my image by the time we're finished. So I wanted to talk about this black and white. So these presets are gorgeous for color, but you can't forget about black and white. Sometimes we want a black and white, right? So this Fave 7 down here is a black and white edit. So I'm going to click on that. We're going to show the black and white. I think it's a really pretty default edit, actually. So I'm going to come up here now to my toolkit, and I'm just going to make a few adjustments. I'm going to increase the contrast maybe just a little bit. Let's click on this. Then let's click on maybe a soft vignette, and I just hover over these and pick which one I think looks the best as I'm hovering. Let's choose 2. That's kind of a medium one. And then I'm going to choose a soft center light neutral here. And remember my tip about this. I do this so much, especially, like I said, if my subject isn't taking up the whole thing. So I'm going to click on the radial filter over here and hover over and find my point. And I'm just going to close this in over my subject a little bit. So it's just more affecting her. I'm going to click done. Now, I want to show you one other thing. So this is a really nice, warm black and white. You can see that there's kind of a brownish tone to this image. Now, how that is added to the image is using the split tone panel over here. We're adding a little bit of color to the highlights and shadows to get that. So if this isn't your exact style, right, you can adjust that. So a few things you can play with are the saturation. So maybe try pulling down the saturation just a little bit, and look how that made a big difference in the overall tone, right? Maybe drag the saturation down a touch. Very different coloring to that black and white, right? You can also play with the balance, okay? And that will also affect how much they're added to the highlights and how much they're added to the shadows, and the balance between those two. So don't be afraid to come over here into the split tone panel. If that brown tone isn't exactly what you love for your black and white, so maybe that's not your style, then maybe come over here and make an adjustment really quickly, and you'll have a totally different tone to your black and white. So let's see, did we have any other? I just wanted to check through here. I'm trying to watch the questions to make sure that I answer any that come up. So if I've skipped any, I'll make sure to go back in the comments and answer your question. Okay, so really easy way to make a beautiful black and white with this set and adjust the tone to your particular style. So I'm going to choose a different image here. I don't want to take a ton of time, but so I just chose a couple of images to go over. Let's try this one. I edited this one in another video that I did about layering for this kit, but let's come over here and we'll play with this one. So the reason I wanted to choose this one is because this image is slightly underexposed, in my opinion. It's a little bit darker than I would normally shoot. And one way I tell that is you look over here. Well, basically the way I tell is I look at the skin tones. Are the skin tones the way I would have seen them in real life, or they may be darker than the way I would see them in real life? And if they're darker, then it's probably underexposed. But this little histogram will kind of tell you that overall maybe this is a little bit dark. And it's, you know, not perfect, but that will tell you or give you an idea. So I'm going to follow the same steps that I did before. I'm going to set my white balance. So I'm going to come up here. I always check auto first. What does auto do? I'm going to click on auto so I can compare between the rest of these. And then I will maybe just scroll over some of these other ones and see what options I'm getting. And frankly, I think auto is the best. As I look through these, I think auto is where we want to start. So the second thing I'm going to do is come over here and set my exposure. Now I can use the toolkit again to set my exposure. What happens when I come over and I scroll through these? I know it's going to need a plus for my exposure, right? So I'm going to look at these different options. Which one do I think? And I'm going to go with the exposure +1. And I think that does a nice job. Because I'm brightening an image, I might be introducing a little bit of grain. And so there are some noise reduction options here as well. I usually won't add these kind of till the end, because as I'm doing other things, I might introduce even more grain. So this is something I come and do at the end. But if I'm adding a lot of exposure to an image, there's a really good chance you're going to introduce grain. And you're really not introducing it, but you're just making it more visible because you're brightening an underexposed image. So let's go back down here and let's start on our edit now that we've got the white balance and the exposure set. So I'm just going to scroll through these: clean color, rich color, pastel color, velvet color. I really like this pastel color. So let's click on that. As we come down here to our S-curve, I'm just going to scroll down through these. I am drawn to the S-curve pop a lot of times. I like that filmic. That's really pretty too. Cross process. This isn't typically my style, but sometimes I find it's a fun thing to add to my images. I actually really like this soft matte and what that does to my image. Now I'm going to come down. I'm just going to scroll past the split tones and see if there's anything that really stands out to me. I don't really want it cooler or warmer. I think we're about right on this. So I'm just going to click over some of these. Silver lilac is something that it's one of the ones I'm drawn to, and you'll probably find that as you play with this set. There are certain presets that draw your attention that you like on your images, and that's a style thing. That tells you that's kind of my style. That's what I like. So let's just scroll past these tint overlays and see if there's anything I want to add. Thinking no, I think we're good. So let's come up here to the toolkit again. I'm going to choose, see what the soft center light ones do, because you know I always like those. Let's try soft center light. I actually think that's really pretty. I think that brightens their faces a lot. One thing you can do is if sometimes maybe it's too much. So let's say this was a little bit too much for this image. I just click on the radial filter, and instead of like adjusting like I did before, making it smaller, because my subjects take up most of the frame, I don't need to do that for this one. But if it was too much, I could always go over here and click on the exposure and maybe adjust it slightly to make it a little bit more what I think it should be for the image. So anyway, I really like that image. I might just leave it like that. Sometimes I look at the vignettes. Sometimes I like a vignette, sometimes I don't. Let's try a vignette. I think that's pretty, that's really subtle. I think that's really nice. Let's just look at the before and after so you can see. Big difference on our image and just a couple of clicks. If this is where I think I want to stop with the image, then I would come over here to noise reduction. And I think noise reduction, frankly, is really hard to see in the preview. You can't see it unless you click. So a lot of times I'll just click on plus 25. Okay, that does a pretty good job. Let's see what plus 50 does. Sorry. Probably a little bit more. And let's click on plus 75. And it's going to be something you may not even be able to see what it's doing on my screen because it's a little bit subtle. But for this image, I would probably go with plus 75. It's going to overall soften your image a little bit too. So you got to be careful. That's why I want to click on it and look and see what it does, because I don't want it to soften too much. And I don't mind seeing some grain. It's really kind of a balance between, am I introducing so much grain that it's distracting from the image? So anyway, thank you for joining me. I think that's where we're going to end. If you have any more questions about this collection, please let me know. I will answer them in the feed if I can, if some came up and I missed them. So please feel free to ask your questions. If you're watching this, you know, in 2 days, you can still ask your questions. I'll try to kind of come back and check on those as they go. Also, rewatch it, because sometimes you'll miss the tips and you'll miss what I showed you here with the different filters and tools. So feel free to come back and rewatch. And if you have additional questions when you're rewatching, let me know that too. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully it helps you get the most out of this new collection. I love it. I think it's super helpful. I love that it allows you to build your edit and build your style. And I hope that you find that too. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day.